is there concern, and is it a concern that is capable of being fixed, and if so, how? That's behind my question.
Thank you, Commissioner. Yeah, the issue is that for a long time we didn't have the correct vehicles. The DPCI has now obtained armored vehicles, which will make that a lot easier. And if I can take the Commissioner back into the time of this operation, remember it was during COVID times. And there was a number of challenges because most entities operated on skeleton staff. So to get extra people like the likes of the TRT, the Highway Patrol, the Flying Squad, to assist one in actually safeguarding these exhibits was a challenge at that time, but that has also bettered from then to now in terms of availability. If I would, for example, have to transport these exhibits now, there is the TRT teams within the different police precincts have been how can I put it? There were more people allocated to those sections that is able to assist us. So at the time of this specific Egerton operation, it was a challenge, but it's getting better by the day, Commissioner. Thank you, Commissioner. The second, or the following challenge is the lack of experience and dedicated prosecutors capable of dealing with sophisticated narcotic prosecutions. The other challenge concerns the poriousness.
If I can pause you on that. Could you just explain what you mean by experienced or dedicated prosecutors? Are you suggesting that there should be a unit within the NPA that's dedicated to narcotics? Or what specifically are you talking about here, and what kind of experience are you saying is lacking?
In my opinion, on that specific point, Commissioners, is that, for example, you have specialized within the NPA environment, you have specialized prosecutors dealing with, for example, fraud, and there's even special fraud courts and the like. Excuse me. So at the end of the day, it would be ideal, and I know we don't live in an ideal world. It would be ideal if one can have prosecutors that actually goes through some of these narcotic training with us, so that they're very much aware of the challenges we sit with. I mean, if I can, for example, take the whole issue surrounding cannabis these days, it is, with the Cannabis Act and the Cannabis Amendment Act, it's always, or not always, but it's for most part a challenge to actually get some of these cases placed on the court roll. And when we have specialized prosecutors, it would make our job much easier. And I mean, people say, yeah, cannabis is not I know in Europe they call it a Class B drug, but it is where drug use starts at, cannabis.
But you would agree that what is essential for successful prosecution at root is investigation, proper investigation.
Absolutely. And that's why I also mentioned earlier the specialized training that I'm, in my humble opinion, is suggesting in terms of the skills of SANEP members that should be escalated, and further training and constant training on the latest developments within this environment of illicit drug trade and so forth, yeah. So I would agree with you, yes.
Okay, thank you. You were at paragraph 31.
Paragraph 31, another challenge is the poriousness of the borders of our republic, including land and maritime borders. South Africa has approximately 72 border posts, which creates a substantial policing challenge in relation to drug trafficking. We also have a very extensive coastline in the Republic that further facilitates the transfer of drugs, for example, consignments of drugs from larger vessels to smaller vessels. And these smaller vessels can then go ashore at very small harbors or even on the beach, for that matter, if that craft is small enough. The further challenge is the challenge.
Can I just, sorry again,
yes.
Colonel, I'm sorry to keep interrupting you. Can you explain how that would take place, how there would be a transfer of a drug consignment from, I mean, when you say a larger vessel, are you talking about large container shipments?
Yes, ma'am.
How would the transfer of drugs take place between those kind of vessels and smaller vessels that are able to then sort of dock at a small harbor or on a beach?
If we can, for example, stay with the cocaine bricks that we're dealing with in terms of the irritant thing. So what they do is they manufacture or come up with a floating device, and this floating device is then packed with this bricks. It would not be the 700 kilograms, for example. It would be a smaller consignment of 20 odd kilograms that is then placed onto this floating device, and this floating device is literally just by corrupt seamen on that vessel, just thrown overboard, and they sometimes even go as far as have a transponder on this floating device that the smaller vessels' crew can pick up on, and then trace this floating device and then uplift it from the sea itself.
Thank you. Okay, so, and we are vulnerable to this because we're a coastal country.
Yes, ma'am.
Paragraph 33.
A further challenge concerns legislation relating to narcotics exhibits. At present, narcotics exhibits must generally be retained until finalization of the criminal proceedings, and that process can take years. The availability of storage is a challenge in that regard.
And are all of these narcotics stored at the Forensic Sciences Laboratory?
All of them are stored, but not plants. And if I mean plants, the cat plant and cannabis plants are not stored at forensics. But the powder and tablet form narcotics are indeed being stored at forensics, Commissioners.
So if the challenge is the legislation, that's what you're pointing out to be the problem. It's that the legislation requires that they be retained. What would be your solution to the problem?
Solution contains in the next paragraph.
Good to you.
Just before the solution, what you've just said, Colonel, is at odds with evidence that we heard last week. Last week, I will not remember who the specific officer was, but amongst the officers, someone was pushing for the urgent destruction or disposal of what was believed to be cocaine. I say what was believed because no testing had been done by FSL at that stage. And I'm wondering, if, in my mind, when you say that the drugs should be kept until the court process has been finalized, I'm wondering how it is and what basis these officers would have been pushing for destruction or disposal.
One can only, in my experience, Commissioner, one can only destruct and destroy these narcotics after the court case. Reason being, throughout the court case, the defense can ask for to actually see these exhibits.
And maybe test them for themselves as well.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. All right, that's...
So is it that it's as a matter of law or instruction, protocol, such exhibits may not be destroyed until the case ends?
I'm not sure if it's law. I speak under correction, Commissioner, but it is an instruction, because at the end of the day, if those exhibits are asked for by the defense and we are not able to produce them, that might definitely harm our case in court, Commissioner.
So an officer who asks the laboratory whether and procedure and whether these can be destroyed before the trial had run, knowingly speaks against the instruction. I mean, if there is an instruction. that
In my
says
opinion,
you
yes,
take-
Commissioner.
Thank you.
I'm just thinking, nobody had been arrested in the matter I'm referring to, but it was only about 5 months. Where you do not arrest any suspects, what are the prescripts? When do you give up and when do you then destroy? What's the timeline?
I don't think there's a specific timeline, Commissioner. That will depend on the progress within the investigation. If you've done all your due diligence in terms of your investigation and you can really not arrest anyone on that specific case in terms of ownership, if you would, for this narcotics, then an officer can make a destruction order, and the destruction order is then forwarded to FSL for execution of the destruction.
So that's probably what makes the difference between what you say to be the prescript on keeping
Yes.
and for how long and what happened here. Thank you very much, Colonel.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
So the situation at present is that the instructions are that it must be retained, right?
If there's a running court case, yes.
Okay. And, okay, so you can continue with what you've picked up in your study of other jurisdictions at paragraph 34.
Thank you, Commissioners. In several foreign jurisdictions, to inter alia include most EU countries, the USA, South America, Australasia, there is legislation that permit the retention of representative and samples for evidence purposes and also for the analysis of these exhibits. And then the rest of the consignment is then destroyed. So a smaller number of the exhibits is then kept, which would make the storage thereof much easier. And I would love to see such legislation in South Africa.
Thank you. The next section,
Before you do that, Colonel, you haven't listed as a challenge the detection part of drugs, whether clandestine laboratories or these ones that come in from outside. Is it because you're satisfied that there is sufficient capacity and ability, both the tools and the human capability within the police, and there's no identifiable areas for improvements?
Commissioner, to answer you on that, we have successes, but I will never be satisfied with where we currently stand. I can, for example, we now recently, my unit, with the assistance of crime intelligence, have picked up information of quite a large cannabis farm. And the issue with this drug laboratories is it is run on in a very clandestine form and fashion. This farm is, for example, on the, sorry for my in the Bundus, and it's not picked up very easily. And yeah, I would agree with you that it is also a challenge, the detection of these drug laboratories. For the most part, crystal meth laboratories one can run out of your garage at your house. And yeah, we've picked up some of those as well. So yeah, the detection, you're quite right, Commissioner. That would also be a challenge, the proper detection of this. And if you say that I'm satisfied, am I satisfied? I'll never be satisfied until we root all of this out, Commissioner. So it is indeed a challenge. You're quite right, Commissioner.
Thank you.
I think, Colonel, and this is why the next section becomes important, because, and it's related to Commissioner Baloy's question, because part of the detection is linked to the investigations, right? And so it's not just about investigative capacity. It's about whether the investigators actually become complicit and part of the crime itself, which I understand to be one of the challenge, in fact, that is why we are here today to talk about this case. Am I correct to describe it in that way?
Unfortunately, that's indeed correct, Commissioners.
So this next section on the rip-on, rip-off method, which the commissioners have also heard a little bit about from I think, Major General Flynn, is a method that was used in the case that we're going to be dealing with, the Eriton case.
That's correct, Commissioner.
And is it correct that that method works only if there is infiltration by law enforcement?
Unfortunately so.
Can you describe now, from paragraph 36, that method?
Excuse me. It is our understanding that narcotics are frequently concealed in so-called legitimate cargo consignments. This concealment takes place in the country of origin where these containers are packed. That is where the so-called rip-on part of this modus operandi comes to the fore, where drugs are concealed. The Eriton case, for example, it was a container containing body parts for Scania trucks. Scania doesn't have a manufacturing plant in South Africa, but an assembly plant in South Africa. And because of the issue that these containers move a lot at sea, there's a space left between the door of the container and the body parts itself. And that cavity is a meter, just over a meter wide. And then we are of the opinion and of the belief, based on what we have picked up and also discussed with colleagues, as I indicated earlier, from other foreign law enforcement agencies, is that when that container then is moved from the owner or the person that rents this container towards the port where the container is shipped from, in that process or in that route, that container is diverted, and it happens very quickly. That's why the rip part of the rip-on happens, is mentioned there. Then what happens is that this drug consignment is then placed in that cavity. Duplicate seals are then manufactured, and the container is sealed again, because the seal number of a container must correspond with the shipping manifest of that specific container. That container is then placed on a vessel, and in this Eriton case, the vessel left from the port of Santos in Brazil, where the Scania manufacturing plant is in Brazil. So it was transported from this plant to the port of Santos, and from the port of Santos, it came to South Africa, being Durban in KZN. Then, as was indicated, this drug syndicates then have to employ some other person within law enforcement, be that the police, be that customs, SARS, or the like, so that they can try and stop this container from going its normal route, to allow them to do the rip-off, where another set of seals is then again used to seal the container again as soon as they rip off this consignment of drugs, and then the container goes on its merry way to the end user of the legitimate cargo within the container.
Could you provide an example of how that would happen at the level of customs and SARS enforcement? I mean, how is it that customs officials would be able to take control undetected? If you're able to just provide an example for us to understand.
Commissioners, what happens is that when these containers land in our ports and a customs or police officer has information or believes that there's something illicit in this container, they put a hold or stop on this container. This container is then moved to a bond yard where a subsequent inspection takes place of the content of this container. Documentation is then completed. Say, for example, they find nothing, the documentation is completed, and it's sealed with police seals again, documentation with the new seal numbers, also added then to the shipping manifest, and then it goes away. In the case of the illicit side and the criminal element, within the law enforcement environment, they would remove, at the bond yard, they would remove by ripping off this drug consignment, they would remove it, and they would seal it again to say, but we found nothing. And they then would distribute it to the drug syndicates for further distribution.
Advocate Hassan, can I just ask a general question? Good morning, Colonel Steyn.
Morning, Commissioner.
What happens when containers get to a port of destination in South Africa? Are they all searched, or do you do a random sampling, or do you only search those where you have received, let's say, a tip-off that there might be something illicit in that container? What happens, what's the procedure when, say, containers from Brazil, 50 of them, from Mexico, 50 of them, land at a port in Durban?
Good Commissioner, the Port of Durban, and as I indicated, we have a number of ports. The Port of Durban, on an average day, that time when we had a look at it, deal with, I think, about 4,000 to 4,500 containers a day. So it would make it a task that is not humanly possible to literally check every container. I know that years ago, there used to be scanning devices, for lack of a better explanation. It was huge X-ray machines that can scan these containers. But I'm not sure. I don't think those are in operation any longer.
So we don't search all the containers. We only search those where you have information that there might be something in it.
Indeed, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Thank you, Colonel. So that concludes, I think, your section then up to paragraph 40. And the important point there that you make at the end is the involvement of corrupt officials that make it possible for the drugs to then enter the market.
Yeah, Commissioners, in my humble opinion, I do not think these syndicates would be able to deal with the rip-on, rip-off method if corrupt officials are not involved.
Your next section deals with the Scania consignment investigation, and this is not Eriton. So we had last week we had Port Shepstone, which also took place in July 2021, June 2021, pardon me, 22nd of June 2021. Yeah. Then we have the Eriton case, which we're going to come to, which took place on 9 July 2021. But in this section, you talk about yet another drug seizure, which took place at the end of July 2021.
That's correct, Commissioner.
Can you just address that before we move on to Eriton? Thank you.
During the course of our the Boesens case, which took place in Eriton. Eriton is part of the Boesens Police Precinct. During that investigation, we constantly had contact with the risk management people of Scania. And then to the latter part of July, it was the last week of July,